EZRJ 810 AM, the voice of the Philippines, proudly presents Piracy Watch with attorney Sarah Jane Sagitan, exploring the concepts of intellectual property rights and protection, teaching you how to protect what you create. And now, here is your host, Sarah Jane Sagitan.
Hi, good morning everyone. Welcome to Piracy Watch, and I'm your host, attorney Sarah Jane Sugitan. This show is being brought to you by the Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. This morning, we're going to have as guests two important writers from the Ateneo Heights. During my days when I was in college, they're my English and Filipino editor of the literary publication of the Ateneo de Manila University. They both taught literature. Yes, and we're going to have them this morning to talk about the creative process that they undergo as writers and why is it important to protect their copyrights as artists. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Mrs. Jing Panganiban Mendoza and Mrs. Muki Kadigbak La Cuesta. Hi, girls. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Hi. Okay, let's start with you, Muki. You taught for 5 years?
Yes, I did.
What subject did you teach?
I taught poetry in three different schools. So I started with La Salle, then UP, and then I went back to Ateneo. So all of the schools basically.
Yeah, and you taught literature?
I taught literature.
Okay, and how are the students during your time when you were teaching them?
Various. I mean, different, syempre. The Ateneo students were different from the UP students, of course, and then and also the La Salle students. So wildly different.
Wildly different.
Wildly different.
And also, I understand you took up your master's in New York?
Yes, I did.
Yes,
I took up poetry.
And you, Muki Katigbak is a published writer both here and abroad, and she has had poetry readings in New York as well when you were studying.
Yes.
So when it comes to, for example, teaching, one thing that has been brought up with us in the Intellectual Property Office is what should be their policy when they share PowerPoint slides.
Okay.
Do you do that? Do you have PowerPoint slides?
Well, I have for teachers or for teaching or for my students
For
when
your
they
students,
report.
yeah.
I don't, but I ask them to write a lot of papers. And in this day and age, internet is so makes information so easy to acquire, diba? So I'm always careful of their sources. I always tell them to cite their sources or to paraphrase at least. So I'm very strict about those things. I don't believe in directly lifting from the internet. I think that's cheating.
Is there a way to check whether students' papers are lifted from a particular
There
source?
actually is. I mean, I check their sources, of course, and then you can tell naman. You can tell if a student wrote something, and if they directly, like if it's very technical, you know that they're not versed in technicalities. So you know, I mean, teachers can always tell if their students directly lift or if they at least paraphrase it. You can tell.
Okay. Jing, you also taught for 4 years literature?
Yes, Filipino literature at the Ateneo.
Jing Panganiban Mendoza is also she underwent workshops with various literary
UP,
institutions.
Iligan, actually. Basta the whole workshop circuit except Siliman because I write in Filipino.
Okay, so Jing is a very prolific writer, and to get into workshops, by the way, there's a screening process for writers, correct?
Yes.
Even in Heights during college, even now, I think they're still doing it. Before a writer gets into a workshop, there's a screening process. It's quite tedious.
Yes, but lately there's a UP Writers Workshop that's quite advanced. You don't apply for it, you get chosen based on your publication, qualification, your accomplishments as writer.
And how about you? What's your policy when teaching?
When I was teaching, it was quite easier to detect if someone is cheating because I'm teaching in Filipino. So, for most sources in literature are written in English. There are very, very few written in Filipino. So, if something sounds very familiar, it must have been written by a colleague, most probably. Or an expert, and there are very few in Filipino. So if the students will copy writers in English, they would have to think to translate. So in a way, it's harder to detect because the wordings would be different when translated. But when it's there, when it's already written, because you're also a student of literature. I was taking my master's when I was teaching. Everything will sound suspicious if it's not theirs. Ateneo freshmen and sophomore students, they have a certain language.
Yes.
You'll easily detect if they're mimicking someone else. And luckily in my case, I never encountered people like that who plagiarize works. But I must say, many acquire this habit of just footnoting everything.
Yes. Yes,
They're
Loki.
afraid to be they're quite afraid to be accused of plagiarizing works. So sometimes they get lazy. They just cite and cite, but still that's better than plagiarizing.
Then copying it word for word. So that is really lazy thinking. I mean, it's safe, it's legal, diba? You're not breaking any rules, but you're also not thinking.
Oh,
you're
and
not
you're not-
using your brain to do anything.
Yes, and you're not writing anything that's yours.
Absolutely. You're not being
just-
original about your
Yes,
thinking.
you're not
Nothing.
being original.
Yeah.
But you're not violating
But
anything.
you're not violating.
So because some students are happy just to get a D,
Yeah.
a passing mark.
Yes.
So
Especially
they don't
in
have to
Ateneo,
think.
diba?
They don't have,
Especially
they don't have
in
to think
Ateneo.
much. Yes.
Yeah, or maybe when they don't have time to do the research in advance, that's what they do. And it's so easy to copy nowadays because children have this. Well, in our age, we also have that technology, but more so
It's
now
not
than
the internet.
before.
I mean, it's much more advanced now. Much more advanced. And I don't think kids actually go to the library and do their research anymore.
They don't read books.
They don't read books anymore
They
because
read
it's all the
everything online.
information, all the knowledge that you need. It's all out there in the net already.
When we were studying, all the teacher's problem was just the cliff notes.
Yeah.
Now the teacher has to be conversant with the language of the internet, has to know how to use the internet
Absolutely.
to research
Absolutely.
also, so that you will know if your students are getting it from there.
And also to hold the students' attention.
Yes.
Because I know some teachers talaga who allow their students already to type on their computers and to research while in class.
There and there in the
There
classroom.
and there. So you have to learn how to speak their language to engage them also in the subject matter.
Yes.
Because I think because of internet, I mean, I think students really have very, very, very limited and short attention spans
Span.
nowadays.
Correct, yes.
So you really have to learn their language in order to engage them, or else nothing will happen. They won't study. If you teach, nothing's going to enter, like that.
When you were in New York, is there what kinds of copyright policies does the university have when it comes to photocopying, for example, readings?
Well,
I mean, it is an exception to copyright fair
Yes,
use for
fair.
academic.
You know,
for academic
I
purposes.
don't think we really had that problem because our sources and our resources were really readily at hand. I mean, we weren't photocopying, we were buying the books themselves in the bookstores. Here, syempre, it's not
different.
like that. The method is completely different. You really have to go to the library. Your teacher will really tell you to Xerox this book, etc. There, it was just readily available. So we didn't have that problem.
And then the books there are not so expensive
Yes.
compared
Yes.
here.
Here.
And
Yeah.
then because Mookie studied poetry, it's a joy to buy poetry.
Absolutely. It didn't feel like a chore anymore.
Or to
Oo.
buy books.
To buy books, and these were people we were reading here na in Manila. Then I studied in the States. You actually got to meet the poets. You actually got to meet the
Nice.
writers you were reading. And like what Jing said, it's cheaper, much cheaper to buy books there. A struggling student could afford to buy,
To buy books.
books.
Okay, now let's talk about, motherhood.
You
This
can't
I like-
plagiarize
You
that.
can't plagiarize that.
Yes,
It's
definitely.
because children are growing up in this age, and these two lovely ladies in front of me are going to be raising children. And I'm sure they're very well versed already in the internet or in the cell
Yes,
phones.
I have a 6-year-old and he researches on the internet about
Nice.
things he sees on TV, about things that we
Yeah.
tell him, so we cannot
Smart.
lie.
You cannot lie.
Yes.
It's prohibited. How about you, Mookie? How many children do you have?
My kid is just 2 months old. So
Okay,
I am
you just had a baby.
I just had a baby. But my husband is like her kid. So everything he gets from the internet. He's my panganay. So
Your husband.
he's like that. Oo.
All right. Okay. What else? A creative process. Do you still write poems?
Yes.
Of course. Of
Yes.
course. And I'm not a poet. When I was with Heights, I was more a critic than a poet.
That's harder. That's harder than being a
Is
poet.
it?
I've shifted ever since now. I write essays now. I
See,
don't
Jing
write
is
poems
Jing is a
poems
very
anymore.
celebrated essayist.
Yes,
course.
yes.
She is. And then, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we'll get back to Mookie and Jing. Right now, we're going to pause for a short break. Please tune in and don't go away.
Now return to Piracy Watch on DZRJ 810 AM, the voice of the Philippines. Here is your host, Sarah Jane Sigitan.
Hi, welcome back on Piracy Watch. I'm attorney Sarah Jane Sugitan, your host, and I'm joined together this morning with by Mookie Katigbak Lacuesta and Jing Panganiban Mendoza. We're going to bring in Charlie from traffic.com for a traffic and weather update. All right, welcome back to Piracy Watch. I'm your host, attorney Sarah Jane Sugitan, and joining us this morning is attorney Louis Calvario. Welcome, sir, to the show.
Good morning.
Good morning. And also joining us this morning are two lovely ladies from Ateneo, Mookie and Jing. All right, Attorney Louie, can you tell us about the efforts of the Intellectual Property Office about protecting our artists, authors, writers, and musicians?
Well, we started maybe a couple of years ago. We tried to emphasize the importance of copyright in our Philippine economy. And in the past, it's always been trademarks and patents, and people get the notion that these two kinds of intellectual property are much more important than copyright. But then, ever since a study from the World Intellectual Property Organization was released sometime in 2008, it can clearly be seen in that study that copyright does contribute significantly to the economy of the Philippines. It's a technical study, like they indicated that copyright-based industries contribute to around 4.82% of the gross domestic product
For
of
the
Philippines.
Philippines.
Yes.
In the United States, their economy is 40% based on copyright industries.
That's right.
Music, books,
And I think it contributes around maybe 8%,
8% of
7 to 8% of their GDP.
All right, we have some pending bills in Congress that will amend our existing laws. What kinds of gaps will the pending bills address?
Well, that bill actually is a bill intended to amend our present copyright law. Now, the copyright law is part 4 of a bigger law, which we call Intellectual Property Code. So it has a chapter on patents, it has one on trademarks, and there's another chapter on copyright. Now, we are now amending the chapter on copyright. Well, the bill actually started as an implementation of our treaty commitment, because way back in 2002, we have acceded to a treaty which is known worldwide as the WIPO Internet Treaties, and this is supposed to address the problems of like illegal downloading,
I see.
and everything in the illegal copying in the internet. So the
Internet
member countries of the World Intellectual Property Organization formulated this treaty precisely to address this problem. And this was formulated way back in the mid-90s, around maybe 96, but we have acceded to it only in 2002. And right now we are trying to incorporate the important provisions of these treaties to our copyright law so that we could address.
Will that address, for example, the copying from the internet that students so rapidly do nowadays? Or not necessarily?
At least it provides for remedies. Remedies in favor of copyright holders when, for example, they
download music,
for example, you uploaded copyrighted work in the internet,
a photo.
Yes, a photo or any kind of writing, and then you place there a computer program that is designed to control access.
I see.
It's called technological measure or technological protection measures. Now, under that treaty, which I have referred to earlier, each member country is duty bound to provide adequate remedy to protect these technological measures from being violated.
Or being circumvented.
From being circumvented, right? That's a technical term under the treaty. So
Because there are ways to go around technological
there are, yes,
measures.
because well, we are a nation of techies, diba?
Techies,
Well,
okay.
And the
it's
borrowers.
common knowledge.
Putting it mildly.
Yes, that's right. And we have lots of
Will that be-
individuals who know how to go around computer
Around, yeah.
programs.
But will that, I mean, with the adoption of this internet treaty, will that make this acts punishable under the law or the penalized?
Yes,
somehow? Fined?
under the present bill.